Now, countries all over the world are moving towards easing lockdown restrictions while dealing with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, which has hit economies. And there is talk of a recession even after governments have pumped trillions of dollars into their economies and slashed interest rates. How bad will it be? And is there any recovery in sight? Questions we are going to try to get answers to from Lord MARLAND, who is currently the chairman of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council. Great to have you on the program this afternoon. Now, Commonwealth countries, including Ghana, have been hit by COVID-19. Tell us what you think are the long-term effects.
I think there are obviously multiple effects. This is a horrendous issue that amazingly no government has had to cope with something like this since probably the Second World War. It's going to have issues that no one really can yet fathom, but obviously the immediate ones are health, mental health, the knock-on effects from having been in isolation for so long. Then, of course, as you've mentioned, every government has sought to keep their economies afloat. This will have a huge on-cost to businesses and humans in terms of repaying that debt over a long period of time. Happily, interest rates are at an all-time low, so the ability to repay that debt and to borrow money to repay it by governments will mean that they will be able to even out this repayment over a longer period. And ultimately, there will be a huge effect on employment and business activity.
Okay, and which industries have suffered the most based on your engagement with member states of the Commonwealth, and what sectors really are finding opportunities? Well,
clearly the initial industries are hotels, restaurants, bars and pubs in the United Kingdom, tourism and travel, airlines, cruise ships, all the rest of it, of which multiple Commonwealth countries are highly dependent. So if you take the Caribbean, the Maldives, Sri Lanka, some of the smaller island states in the Pacific that make up Commonwealth countries, the impact is going to be huge in terms of tourism. South Africa, Kenya, going through many of the African tourist hotspots are going to suffer tremendously, and indeed have. I've written to the British Prime Minister asking, in fact I was the first person to write to the British Prime Minister asking him to lift this 14-day quarantine that the UK are planning on imposing, because the economic problem for that will be horrendous for these for people who need to travel and need to revive the economies of some of these smaller island states. But really, every business has been affected, probably with the exception of Zoom and some of these web chat things, and of course the distribution networks. But everyone's really been affected by it. And some, it has been immediate, where there's been a cash flow crisis, and some we haven't yet seen the effect, because the governments have tried to soften the blow of some of these businesses. So we won't really see the long-term effect until the back end of this year.
All right, let's talk about the situation here in Africa, because we have seen fewer casualties and deaths compared with other parts of the world. And is this reason why there have been less casualties and deaths? Is there any reason to it?
Well, I'm no scientist or medic, so I can't really respond to that question, other than to say I do think African governments have managed this issue extremely well. Large. Certainly Ghana has been extraordinary in the way that they've managed it, and that will enable you to, to recover much more quickly than others. And of course, we have to hope that there won't be a second wave, because if we have a second wave, that would be quite catastrophic.
And that's what we all fear, that there would not be, and we hope that there would not be a second wave of this virus pandemic. Now, so we've talked about how millions are out of work, financial markets have been rattled, and supply chains disrupted as factories around the world close. So I'm interested in knowing how Commonwealth is helping member states to get back on their feet during and after the crisis.
Well, the Commonwealth, of course, is a networking body, and it's going to be for each individual government to deal with their own crisis. Where we can help and where we are helping in our organisation, the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, is, as I said, on tourism, on helping to persuade governments that lifting the quarantine is the right thing to support these economies, particularly where a number of countries, Africa, as you say, Caribbean, have not really had it in a significant amount. The other thing we're campaigning very hard on is that if there is a vaccine, this vaccine has got to be shared amongst countries, and obviously I'm bound to say Commonwealth countries, but it can't be kept by the developing country. They've got to be a donor to the world as a whole.
Okay, and finally, to what we are really interested in, the world is braced for a recession even after governments and central banks have pumped in trillions of dollars into the economies and slashed interest rates. What do you think will be the, do you think the recession will look like? What would it take for us to recover?
Well, I hope you've got a crystal ball, because I haven't. But let us look at some of the and repeat what I said earlier. Firstly, there is a massive national debt incurred by countries. How are they going to repay that? Are they going to be able to inflate their economies to reduce the debt out of it? Does inflating the economy bring higher interest rates for the man and woman on the street in terms of their borrowings? Does this mean that we move to a greater AI-based industries? Does it mean that we have mortgaged future generations to a very high tax regime? These are the questions that we will struggle with in the next few months as the effects of these begin to come into the system and governments respond to it. But I think there are positives, and we must look to the positives, and we must look at the positives of how we've all had to adapt in the last few months to this lockdown, how our businesses have changed, how the way that we've communicated in this last few months, and the productivity that still occurred despite these terrible things. And I think, obviously I've only been able to look around the UK, I see it's going to come back very quickly, the productivity. And I'm rather hoping that I'll be able to get my very long hair cut sooner rather than later, as I'm sure all of us have wanted to in isolation. But this is, let us make no mistake, this is one of the worst things that's ever happened. Well, it is arguably the worst thing that's happened in my lifetime, probably in the last century, and it'll be an extraordinary test on government's resolve, which has been tested to the limits almost so far on how globally we recover. And so organisations like ours, the Commonwealth, which is a networking organisation, which brings nations together, which has a common theme, will have to play a part, and I very much hope we will be at the forefront of that.
All right. Thank you so much. We've run out of time, which we could continue. Lord MARLAND, you are currently the chairman of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council. I appreciate your time with us this afternoon.
Thanks very much for having me. Great to see you.